Ben, what are you doing?
Well, I would say that I'm just drifting here in the pool.
Why?
Well, it's very comfortable just to drift here.
Have you thought about graduate school?
No.
Would you mind telling me then what those 4 years of college were for? What was the point of all that hard work?
You got me.
I really get this movie.
Left its seeds while I was sleeping, and neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my
Benjamin Braddock is at a confusing crossroad in his life.
Hey, there's the award-winning scholar.
We're all very proud of you, Ben.
Thank you, Mrs. Carlson.
Is that the new car out there, that little red wop?
That's Ben's graduation.
What are you going to do now?
I was going to go upstairs for a minute.
Oh, I meant with your future, your life.
Well, that's a little hard to say.
Ben.
Excuse me. Mr. McGuire.
Ben.
Mr. McGuire.
Come with me for a minute. I want to talk to you.
Plastics.
Exactly how do you mean?
There's a great future in plastics. Think about it. Will you think about it?
Yes, I will.
This confusion isn't helped when longtime neighbor Mrs. Robinson leads him to her home and starts acting a little strange.
For God's sake, Mrs. Robinson. Here we are. You got me into your house. You give me a drink. You put on music. Now you start opening up your personal life to me and tell me your husband won't be home for hours.
So?
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
From here, Ben is roped into an affair with the aging temptress and uses their midnight escapades as distractions from his obligation and nagging parents, but not for long.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, I want you to keep your wits about you tonight. You never know what tricks Ben picked up back there in the East.
Ben is thrilled at the prospect of a real commitment with Elaine, but there's just one problem.
I have to tell you something.
What is it?
That woman.
What?
That woman, that older woman that I told you about.
You mean that
Yes,
one?
the married woman. That wasn't just some woman.
What are you telling me? Benjamin, will you just tell me what this is all about? Oh, no.
Will Ben make it out alive? What are his parents, who closely associate with the Robinsons, going to think of his actions? And, most importantly, what would Elaine do if she discovered Ben's affair?
No.
when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light.
While The Graduate wasn't a Citizen Kane stir in film technique, it did introduce some revolutionary aspects of cinematic language. Through use of carefully controlled shadow and space, director Mike Nichols was able to give his shots heavy symbolic significance and memorability, leading to some becoming classics. Nichols was also among the first crop of directors to fully utilize the widescreen format, enhancing the level of isolation and emptiness in his compositions, a choice perfectly appropriate for this kind of tale. For the soundtrack, famous guitar duo Simon and Garfunkel lend their melancholy shades to Benjamin's plight, and I've got to say, their music makes the film. Not necessarily the songs themselves, but the way they're used. Nichols expertly inserts them in longer montage sequences where they say more about the character's emotions than any actor could ever put into words. Fantastic use of scoring.
A love once new has now grown old.
I'd also like to take this time to comment about the use of color and patterns in the film. Heavy nihilistic blacks and blank, inexpressive whites give the film a very somber tone for a color picture, and constant application of catskins on Mrs. Robinson was a more than clever way of implying that she was a cougar.
Please do so on the left.
And touch the sound.
The acting in The Graduate is great all around. Dustin Hoffman, in his film debut, gives Benjamin a level of naivety and anxiety that may seem a little forced at times, but always wins your laughs and sympathy. He's very much a sheltered suburban boy. Anne Bancroft as Mrs. Robinson is equally fantastic. She balances authority and promiscuity in a way that makes her regal and yet ready to snap at any second, very unstable and authoritative.
Listen to me very carefully, Benjamin. You are not to see Elaine again, ever. Those are my orders, is that clear?
Mrs. Robinson, do you think
I can make things quite unpleasant.
How?
In order to keep Elaine away from you, I am prepared to tell her everything.
I don't believe you.
Then you better start believing me.
The rest of the acting is fairly solid, but one performance in particular kind of irks me. Why is Elaine, as played by Catherine Ross, so boring? Maybe it's just me, but I always thought her character was the most forgettable aspect of the film. She's basically a Mary Sue added halfway through for conflict, and Ross doesn't give her any additional charm beyond that, in my opinion.
People talking without speaking. People hearing without...
Themes of loneliness, boredom, and apprehension were commonplace by 1967, but having your main character requite them through a love affair was not. The film provoked mild controversy in its time for Ben and Mrs. Robinson's age gap and purely sexual relationship, and was among a wave of 60s cinema that brought the sexual liberation movement to the screen. The film was also released during a time when the baby boomers were returning to suburbia from college, which the various generation gaps and interest conflicts in the film comment on. Some argue these references date the film, but other ideas in the film are indisputably universal. Adolescence is a place of awkward transitions, but also new beginnings, and the ultimate message of The Graduate, in my eyes, is to enjoy the newness of it all before circumstance wrings us into adults, stuck in our ways and responsibilities. In this way, The Graduate has a J.D. Salinger view of adolescence, rampant with confusion, anxiety, and narcissism. And it's very unique for that. In an era where Bildungs Roman is equal to big, loud, obnoxious sex comedy, it's nice to see a film that handles its material in a more serious and cinematic manner. The Graduate is a funny and relatable film even 50 years later. Give it a watch.